Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle. I have so many books out from the library that it's starting to feel a little bit overwhelming. So I thought that I would do a try a chapter tag. I have here, in my read a book and open your mind mug, I have some French vanilla cappuccino. So I am going to drink some of this while I read a chapter from each of these 10 books. I will show you what I have to read. I have The White City by Grace Hitchcock. This is a historical mystery set during the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago, what became known as the World's Fair. So I'm going to try a chapter of that. I have this one that looks very boring. It is called Post-mortem by Guy Cullingford. Let me show you. I'll show you this instead. This is a mystery that was written in 1953. I have Death in the Sunshine by Steph Broadribb, The Retired Detectives Club. I have On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor by Jaime Jo Wright. This was a recommendation from Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelves. I have Miss Aldridge Regrets by Louise Hare, another historical mystery set on a ship. I have Jacquot and the Waterman by Martin O'Brien. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly or not. This was also a recommendation from one of my subscribers. I forget right now who that was, but that was a recommendation. I have Zadok's Treasure by Margot Arnold. I think this was also potentially a recommendation. The only copy that I could get was a large print edition, but that's okay. And this was originally published in 1980, but I got it because there's a character who's an anthropologist and there's a character who's an archaeologist, and that's right in my wheelhouse. I have The Mad Girls of New York by Maya Rodale. This is also historical fiction set in New York City in 1887, and it is about those 10 days when Nellie Bly went undercover in an asylum to do a newspaper report. And so, yeah, that's also very interesting. I have Game of Patience by Susanne Alleyn. This one, I cannot remember anything about why I got it or what interested me in it. It's set in Paris in 1796. Oh, that's right. Aristide is a freelance undercover police agent and investigator, and there is a double murder, but it's set during the years between the Terror and the rise of Napoleon, which is a time period that very much interests me. And then I have The Missing Heiress by Karen Charlton, the Detective Lavender series. This one, again, is another recommendation from a subscriber, historical mystery set in Northumberland in November of 1809. All right, so I am restacking these books and I will start my first chapter. I am going to start with The White City. So let's see what I think of this one. Okay, so I read the first chapter in The White City by Grace Hitchcock. And yeah, I will be continuing. It was really entertaining. It started right away with our main character, oh dear. Winifred Wilde. She's at the World's Fair and she sees a man take a woman away, and he had a revolver, and so it's, she saw a kidnapping, and so she goes interestingly, rather than trying to get the attention of someone at the fair, she gets in a cab and she goes to the police station, where we learn that her father is an inspector at the police station, and she tells her story, and we discover that she has cried wolf before and nothing has come of it, and so her father isn't taking her seriously. We learn that she reads a lot of penny novels, and it's just assumed that she has an overactive imagination. But her father wants her to be safe, and so he sends one of his detectives to follow his daughter to ensure her safety. And then the chapter ends on like this really exciting, like, ooh, something interesting's happened that really made me want to turn right away to the second chapter. So yeah, I will be continuing this one. It was a fun start. Okay, next up, I'm going to read a chapter in Post-mortem by Guy Cullingford. I really don't know a lot about this one, but I will give it a whirl. I want to read this to you. This is great. I am a writer, and a moderately successful one, though far indeed from being the cornerstone of a crime club or the pillar of a popular publishing concern. It is true that certain aspects of the kind of murder story which deans and dons write under whimsical pen names arouse my interest. Elementary psychology is an essential study for all who follow the trade of novelist. But for myself, I prefer to cast my modest pearls before the more reflective and cultivated of my fellows. I have my own public, and they have remained faithful to me in their fashion. Luckily for their diminished purses, my output is small. I reckon to complete a novel every 3 years. I need scarcely say that I am fortunate enough not to have to rely on my own exertions to keep myself and my family. They would long ago have been in the gutter, or rather become yet another charge on the taxpayer, if they had been dependent on my literary earnings. I am a writer, and the natural reaction of a writer is to set forth his trouble in words. He may heighten them a little and bestow them on a character of his own imagining, but out they must, and once he has committed them to paper they lose their power to mortify him, or so I believe, and may instead even bring him profit. But as I am not engaged here in transmuting my troubles into royalties, I need only state them as briefly as possible without employing subterfuge or exaggeration. Quite plainly, then, it is obvious that some member of my household is out for my blood. Isn't that great? The first chapter of this one was great, and I am very invested now in finding out where this story goes, so I will definitely be continuing the post-mortem. So that's great. Okay, next up for try a chapter is Death in the Sunshine by Steph Broadribb. The Retired Detectives Club. I'm very curious to know, like, how close this is to the Thursday Murder Club, because it is about retired detectives in Florida and solving a mystery, and this was published just this year. So, yeah, I'm very curious about this one. So, let's give the first chapter a shot. First chapter, Moira. So it looks like we're going to get a variety of perspectives. Moira, according to the back, seems to be the main character, but we'll see. Okay, so even just from the first 3 paragraphs, it's written in the third person, which is fine, but it's written in present tense, and I don't always love present tense, and so I'm curious to know if the entire book is in present tense or just the Moira portions. That will be interesting. Okay, so I finished the first chapter of Death in the Sunshine. I'm intrigued. It's interesting. Like I already said, I'm not sure about the present tense, but we'll see. If I get really into the story, then I tend to kind of I can ignore that. It was a good first chapter. It was interesting. We learned some intriguing information about Moira's past. She's 58, relatively new to this retirement community. We learned that she was a detective in London and retired to Florida, so she's escaping something. And at the end of the chapter, she discovers a body in the pool and calls it in. And I did see that chapter 2 is labeled Philip, so we're getting a new perspective in chapter 2, but it is also in present tense. So I think the whole novel is going to be present tense, which is interesting. I checked the back, and the author herself was born and brought up in the UK, and now lives, I believe, in Florida, or sorry, in the States. So she's written her character maybe somewhat similarly. So I think that's interesting. I'm intrigued, and so I will definitely continue with this one as well. Okay, next up is On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor by Jaime Jo Wright. I've never read anything by this author. As far as I know, this has a dual timeline. The back says Foxglove Manor would twist its way into your soul until one day it owned you and it called to you and it didn't cease haunting you until you came back. Ooh. So yeah, this one sounds maybe sort of a little bit gothic-y, so it's a good time of year for that. So I will read a chapter in this and let you know. Okay, so I read the first chapter on the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor. Interesting. I'm trying to decide if it's going to be too flowery, but I think it's okay. So chapter 1 is Foxglove Manor, April 1885, and that's the chapter that I read. And then chapter 2, I saw is a different timeline. So this is going to be a dual timeline story, but all set at Foxglove Manor. So we have 1885 and then present day. So in 1885, we meet Adria. Her full name is Alexandria, and she is in disgrace and has been sent to Foxglove Manor. I wanted to read the first paragraph to you so you got an impression of what I meant about the language being maybe a little too flowery. I'm not entirely sure. What do you think of this? He had ruined death for her and the hope of it, thwarted death on all sides until the possibility of escape was removed entirely and she was left with breath, body, and the plaguing memories of many yesterdays. Memories she would never allow to rise to the surface again. Like a shipwreck beneath the brutal waves of the expanse of cold lake, so were the abuses she had endured. It would be a monumental task to raise them from their graves, to revive them, and to see them sail again. And who would want to? Shipwrecks were things to be forgotten. Memories were like shipwrecks. So I'm curious to know what you think of that paragraph. But I will continue with that one and see where it goes. Okay, next up is Miss Aldridge Regrets, which is a historical mystery set in 1936. So I'm very curious to know what this one is going to be like. I love a historical mystery, and I love that it's set on a boat. I'm curious to know how much of the book is set on a boat. And so yeah, let's just dive right in. Okay, so it opens with a brief prologue that's told in the first person, and we're not sure who that person is, except that they watch someone die, someone that they killed die in the first chapter, and they do mention Lena Aldridge, who is the main character. She's there when it happens. It happens at the club. So that's intriguing. I'm curious to know how much of that we're going to get, the first person perspective from the killer. I haven't read a book like that in a long time. So I'm going to keep going because it was only two pages. So then we get Strike Up the Band, Chapter 1, Wednesday, 2nd September, Queen Mary. And then this again is first person, and I'm assuming from Lena's perspective, but I'm about to find out. Okay, so I continued on and read chapter 1, and it is from the first person perspective of Lena. She's on the ship. It's just left the dock for New York from England. And yeah, I mean, it was a short chapter, so we didn't get a lot, except that we know that she feels that she needs to leave London. She has an opportunity waiting for her in New York, and I did like there are 2 mentions of Agatha Christie, so that's great. And the last paragraph of chapter 1 was intriguing. Of course, I should have known better. I thought that the part I had been offered wouldn't begin until I arrived in New York, but the play had already begun. The director had had the cast in place, and the curtain had been raised for days. This was my role of a lifetime, and indeed, not every player would make it to their curtain call. So that intrigues me enough to keep going for sure. Okay, next up is Jacquot and the Waterman by Martin O'Brien. I'm not sure how to say that name, but this one, it says in the synopsis on the inner thing, the Waterman is no ordinary killer, but then Daniel Jacquot is no ordinary detective. I'm curious to see what we've got here. This was written in 2005. I've never heard of this series or this author, so I'm very curious, and I believe that it takes place in France. So let's find out. Okay, so the first chapter of this was intriguing. It totally pulled me in. It told of a family, parents and 3 children who were vacationing by the water, and one of the kids yells, "I can't see Julie," and they see like the inflatable out on the water, and they're worried that she's fallen off, that she's in the water. The father dives in, and in a desperate attempt to find his daughter, and he finds a body, and he pulls it up, and when he breaks the surface, he sees 4 people on the shore trying to call out to him, his wife and the 2 kids plus Julie, and they're yelling that they found her in the woods. And so then he looks down and realizes that the body he brought up from the water was not his daughter. So who is it? So yeah, I will definitely be continuing on with this one. That was definitely an intriguing first paragraph for sure. Okay, next up we have Zadok's Treasure by Margot Arnold, and I'm intrigued by this one. It is set in the Holy Land, and there is an anthropologist and an archaeologist involved in the story, so that sounds good to me. Okay, so I read the first chapter of Zadok's Treasure by Margot Arnold. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to continue on, but I'm still not entirely sure of the writing, and it might be just a bit too dated for me. I think this was written in 1980, but we'll see. So in the first chapter, we have a woman has come to the office of Tobias Glendower, who is a British archaeologist. And she wants him to help her find her husband, Bill, who has gone missing. Bill has been on an archaeological dig in Israel. But what he's actually been doing is he's been doing a spot of treasure hunting. He's been trying to find Zadok's treasure, and he has gone missing. And so Valerie wants Tobias's help in finding her husband. He insists on bringing along a coworker called Penelope, who is an anthropologist from the United States. He reluctantly agrees to go. He's not a fan of this woman. He's friends with Bill, but he's not a fan of Bill's wife. But he does agree to go and see if he can find out what's happened to Bill. And that's the first chapter. So I'm going to continue. We'll see. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure. The writing seems to be a little bit dated, but we'll see. If the story's good enough, I can give that a pass. Okay. Next up is The Mad Girls of New York by Maya Rodale. This is the one set in 1887 with Nellie Bly, and I'm very curious about this one, so I will let you know how I go. Chapter 1, Welcome to New York. I'm off for New York. Look out for me. And that's a quote by Nellie Bly. Newspaper Row, New York City, 1887. Nellie did not take New York by storm. Not at first, not as she had planned. She had arrived in spring when the city was bursting into bloom and the air full of promise, with $100 in her purse along with her clips from her days at the Pittsburgh Dispatch, and ambition to burn. Of course, she could get a job as a reporter for one of the big city papers, even though it was hardly done for a woman. Of course, she would become a sensation, even though it was widely agreed that a woman should do no such thing. Nellie was good at two things: asking questions and believing in herself. But even Nellie was starting to lose her spark and swagger as spring, with its blossoms and joyous air, turned into a hot, stinking New York City summer, and no one on Newspaper Row had the time of day for a girl reporter. Not the Herald, not the Sun, not the Mail and Express, not the Times, and not the World. She really had her heart set on the World, but at this point, she would take anything. Okay, I read the first chapter of The Mad Girls of New York. This is a book that I learned about from Krista at Books and Jams. She talked about reading it recently, and so I grabbed it from the library. And the first chapter was great. We got, an initial impression of Nellie and her discovering how difficult it is for a woman to get a job at a newspaper. There's just no respect. The men who run the papers just don't believe a woman could do it. And so, yeah, I'm very intrigued, and I will definitely be continuing on with this one. Okay, next up is Game of Patience by Susanne Alleyn. This is the one that is set in Paris in 1796. And I'm very intrigued. So let's see. This was written in 2006. There's a foreword that I'm not going to read right now. Okay, the first chapter of this was great. I'm definitely going to be continuing this one, and I'm debating still, but this might be the one that I read first in this stack. One thing that I'm interested in is that this is the 9th book in my stack of 10, and so far I haven't DNF'd any of them. They've all been books that I want to continue, so that's interesting. So this is set, like I said, in Paris in 1796. And our main character is Aristide, who is with the police, and he is there to view an execution. There are 3 people being sent to the guillotine, and one of the convicted men is shouting he is guilty, but this other man who is about to be executed is innocent, over and over again. And that man, when he goes to the guillotine, does claim his own innocence and says that he forgives the judges for condemning him. And so it causes Aristide to have this struggle within himself of whether or not they sent an innocent man to the guillotine, and how often does that happen, and has he done it himself as a a police officer. So it was a good start, and I am definitely curious to see where it's going. I enjoyed the writing style, and so yes, I will definitely be continuing with this one for sure. And last but not least is The Missing Heiress by Karen Charlton. This is also historical mystery set in Northumberland in November of 1809. Oh, I forgot to say, this is the right time of year also to read that previous one set in France, because it's that first chapter took place on the 30th of October, and then chapter 2 starts on November 1st. So it's the perfect time of year. Same with this one, because this one starts in November. A menacing figure stalks women through Harshaw Woods, and a beautiful young heiress disappears from her locked bedchamber. So it seems like we've got maybe a bit of a locked room mystery. So I'm very curious to see what I think about this. This was published in 2012, and the dedication is interesting: for my mother, Carol James, who introduced me to the delights of historical fiction. The bookcase in our family dining room overflowed with Georgette Hare, Victoria Holt, Jean Plady, Catherine Cookson, and some rather saucy novels featuring a lively wench called Mariana who had a thing for pirates. This is where the story really began. Thanks, Mum. So that's intriguing, because I love Georgette Hare, Victoria Holt, and Jean Plady. So we will see. I'm not sure about the lively wench with a thing for pirates, but we will see. So chapter 1 takes place in London in October in 1809. Okay, I finished the first chapter of The Missing Heiress. I'm intrigued. I will definitely continue with this one. The first chapter, like I said earlier, takes place in London. It's the era of the Bow Street Runners, and it's just before the detective branch, or like the police, the Metropolitan Police, I think. It's just before that started. It's also the Regency era, so think Jane Austen, but this is very much not Jane Austen. The first chapter, although not violent or anything or terribly dark, was definitely gritty. We got a little glimpse at, the underworld of London. And Detective Lavender finds Constable Woods and asks him to come with him up to Northumberland for a case. This woman has disappeared from her bedchamber, and Lavender wants Wood to come with him to solve the case. So I will definitely be continuing with this one as well. I am intrigued. So my pile of books, at this point, I will show you how I have ordered them, if I can lift them all. Hang on. Here we go. Okay. So, the one that intrigued me the most at this point that I'm going to start with is Post-mortem, then Game of Patience, Jacquot and the Waterman, The White City, The Mad Girls of New York, The Missing Heiress, Death in the Sunshine, something about Foxglove Manor. I've already forgotten the name of that. Hang on one second. On the Cliffs of Foxglove Manor. I've already forgotten that. Then Miss Aldridge Regrets and Zadok's Treasure. Okay, so that's where they stand right now, but I'm curious to hear from you. Have you read any of these books? Do you think I should move any of them up in the stack to read sooner rather than later? Because I will 100% take your opinions into consideration and reorganize this stack. If you've read a book and you've just totally loved it, and maybe the first chapter didn't give me enough to know that I should read it sooner rather than later. I'd love to hear about that from you. So let me know in the comment section down below if I should readjust my stack in any way. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.